Well, hello and welcome to ECGrid Presents. I'm your host, Linda Moore, and I'm happy you're all joining us today. For those new to us, Lauren Data ECGrid is a leading provider of B2B connectivity through cloud-based EDI solutions and unmatched customer support. We empower businesses like yours to streamline your supply chain, enhance collaboration, and drive efficiency. In this month's edition of ECGrid Presents, we'll be exploring the future of barcodes with our guest, Amy Reiter from GS1 US, the authority on standards and product identification, including the UPC barcode. GS1 has created a program called Sunrise 2027 in response to growing demands for greater product information, transparency, traceability, and authentication. Before I hand it over to Amy, I invite you all to type any questions that may come up during the presentation right in the QA box so we can address them during and toward the end of the session. Amy, it is great to have you with us. We've been looking forward to this session for some time, and I know you have lots of information to share. I think I'm speaking for most folks by saying that we'd love to get a better understanding of not just the reasons behind what seems like a huge change and a positive disruptor in the supply chain industry, but also what retailers, manufacturers, brands, and service providers can do starting now to prepare for what's ahead.
Linda, thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to share this big initiative with this audience. This is something we've been working on here at GS1 US for years, and really excited to just keep expanding the message and getting it out there on what really the benefits are of 2D barcodes. As Linda said, I'm Amy Reiter. I'm from GS1 US. I've been here for about 4 years. And prior to that, I spent over 20 years in department store retail, different retailers within the US. So I've spent almost my whole career talking about retail talking about retail from the retailer side, but working with our brands to bring things to life. And that's what I do here at GS1 US. I lead our apparel and general merchandise initiative, which is really talking with brands, retailers, and service providers and using GS1 standards. So let me get started and just talk about what GS1 really is and who we are and what we do. I have an antitrust caution here, and I'll get to why we have that on all of our slides. If you've ever been to any kind of GS1 US presentation, you've seen this slide before. So who is GS1 US? Who are we? We're a neutral and not-for-profit organization that's a global standards organization. As Linda mentioned, we're most known for the UPC barcode. We're user-driven and governed. Everything we do at GS1 US comes from the industry. Even what we're going to talk about today with Sunrise 2027 and the move to 2D barcodes, this wasn't a GS1-ish idea. This came from industry as needing more data behind products. So everything we do comes from the industry. We're global because GS1 is actually a global federation made up of over 115 member organizations, but we're also local. I work for GS1 US, so we focus on the US side of the business, the US side of the house, so in North America as well, bringing those ideas that are just about the North American piece. We talk about GS1 US, but we share those globally with our global partners all around the world. Over 1.5 million companies use GS1 standards, and sometimes you don't even know it. Anytime you see a UPC barcode, those are GS1 standards, and more than 6 billion are scanned every day. It's such a crazy number to me that I hear all the time, but 6 billion. Every time you go to the grocery store and you scan that UPC barcode, those are GS1 standards. There's over 50 million GTINs in our registry of UPC data. And 50 million products are in our global data synchronization network. So just staggering numbers of products. And the biggest thing about GS1 standards is that they're interoperable, and that's how we can be used worldwide. A UPC can be scanned at a grocery store here in the US, but can also be scanned in Europe as well, or in China, or in India. When we talk about GS1 standards, we like to bucket them into 3 areas. identify, capture, and share. How do you identify your product? How do you capture that data? And then how do you share it between your brand and retail partners? And how do service providers then actually make all of that happen? So we bucket everything into these three groups. And so this slide here is an eye chart, but I love it because it really shows what I mean by identify, capture, and share, and the different layers that go into each one. So I'll start at the top with identify. These are GS1 identification numbers, and you can see them across the top. And as Linda said, we'll share these slides with you after, so you can see it in more detail. But so identify means the actual number. So when I say a GTIN, a global trade item number, that's the actual identification of your exact product, or a global location number, the identification of that exact location that belongs to you. These numbers are licensed from us here at GS1 US. When you say I need a UPC barcode, you come to GS1 US, we license those numbers to you to identify your product. And I mentioned the registry on the previous slide. Those numbers are then licensed to you. And if someone was going to look up that UPC barcode, which you actually can online, it would say it belongs to you and this is your product. It gives you that level of security that your products are your own. So that's the numbering system that identifies the product. The second piece is capture, and that's GS1 data carriers. And these are the barcodes, and you can see them starting from the left. The EAN UPC, it's very ubiquitous in the market. It said 6 billion are scanned every day. And that's how you capture those numbers. So the numbers, you can see it really teeny tiny here on this barcode, but the UPC number is the GTIN that's part of that barcode. And all across this slide are different types of data carriers to capture that data. We're going to focus today on, we'll talk about the UPC, a 1D, which is a 1D barcode, but we're also going to briefly mention RFID tags, but really the crux of what I want to talk about today are all the way on the right, the QR code and the data matrix using GS1 Digital Link. This is what, when we talk about 2D barcodes, this is what we mean, a QR, and for intents and purposes today, to keep it easy, I'll talk about a QR code. The last part of identify, capture, and share is sharing. How do I share this data between my trading partners? And there's different ways. And obviously, we're here with Lauren Data. So EDI obviously is a interoperable way of sharing data, as is EPCIS, which is a way to share event data. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So again, keep this in mind as we're talking through everything today. Identify, capture, and share is the crux of how interoperable standards work within GS1. So I want to touch briefly on supply chain visibility. And the reason this wheel spins is because your supply chain is always moving. There's always moving parts. And when we talk about supply chain visibility using GS1 standards, we like to break it into three buckets: inventory management, traceability, and sustainability. And within this wheel, you can see there's different wedges because there's different parts of the supply chain, but they all interact with each other. Today, from today's purposes, what we're going to focus mostly would be on inventory management through tracking, because where the 2D barcodes enable further tracking and more upgraded inventory management, but also sustainability, because 2D barcodes can hold more data, including sustainability data. And from a traceability perspective, I'm going to talk about EPCIS and how that can be used throughout the supply chain. And 2D barcodes enable traceability as well. So as you look at your supply chains and the holistic piece of looking at all the different data points to it, GS1 standards can help enable all of it. What this slide shows is your supply chain, and really even a crawl, walk, run way of looking at a supply chain and how you can use GS1 standards to help your businesses grow. I said a GTIN is used, 6 billion times a day. That's the basis. That's your crawl, is using a GTIN. But you can also use EDI to share ASN data. But as you start to grow, can you encode more data, like a batch lot, or start to use EPCIS, or even 2D barcodes. And then when you grow even further, it's putting all those things together. GTINs and serial numbers, EPCIS at EPC for RFID, inventory management using EPCIS, putting all the standards together to help your supply chain from the beginning to end, sorry. I wanted to touch briefly on RFID in retail. So RFID stands for radio frequency identification, and RFID technology is not new. It has been around for years. Back in my retail career, we were doing RFID pilots probably in 2008. So it's not new, especially in the apparel industry. But what we're seeing, it's becoming more and more used because there is so much data that you can get from using RFID. So if you think about the supply chain wheel and that inventory tracking, RFID allows for better and more accurate inventory management tracking because you don't need line of sight. You can literally, scan RFID tags in the air using your hand and a gun without having to scan each individual barcode. So imagine, and what the other piece to RFID is, when you're using an EPC encoded tag, your data, it's serialized. So like this slide shows, where one UPC for a size large t-shirt, you're getting each actual individual t-shirt, which is more data than we used to get in the past. And it's just enriching your data within your supply chain to understand really at the individual each level what you own. And that leads me to this next slide to talk a little bit about EPCIS and using that really rich EPC data for sharing between brands and retailers or even your factories. So what this slide is illustrating is that if you are packing your data at the factory at the EPC level, so at the serialized level, you can take all of that wonderful rich data and put it into an EPCIS repository. And I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that in a second. But what now you can do is you can share, as you ship that merchandise to your brand distribution center, they can read that same EPC level data at the carton level. And if there's an issue with it, you can, the brand says, no, I didn't get that. You have proof from your factory to say, yes, I did ship you all of this EPC data. I can show you to each individual item what you have. And that's using a standard called EPCIS. So what is EPCIS? It's Electronic Product Code Information Services, which is a mouthful, which is why we call it EPCIS. But it's a global standard for sharing event data throughout the supply chain. It's what we're seeing, what I'm seeing now, especially within the industry, is that there is a need for more data throughout the supply chain. One of the pieces of the supply chain wheel was traceability. And what I'm seeing more and hearing more from both brands and retailers is that they need traceability data throughout the supply chain, not just brand to retailer anymore. It's going back through from tier 4 to tier 3 to tier 2. Where was my product made? How, and going along with sustainability too, how was it made? Was this made at a farm that was organic cotton? EPCIS allows you to see that data because you're seeing the product move throughout the supply chain from end to end. And EPCIS is a standard and a language that allows that to be shared. So how does that help? Like I said, traceability throughout the supply chain. So if you see this picture, you can see each part of the supply chain they're basically sharing their piece of the data into this EPCIS repository, which is just a data repository to say, hey, here's where it started, here's where it went, here's where it's going, and here when it got to me, how did it get there? And it's not a new standard. We joke around that sometimes standards take 50 years to move along. This standard's been around for a long time, but now that there is a need to understand traceability data from beginning to end, we're seeing more need for EPCIS. EPCIS has been used in the healthcare industry for years as a part of the drug Supply Chain Security Act, they needed a way to show how the drugs are moving through the supply chain. So the regulation around that enabled the need for EPCIS. What I'm seeing, and I focus on the apparel industry, is that even without any type of regulation around it, there is a need to understand where was my data or where was my product from beginning to end. And EPCIS is going to enable that. But it also helps counterfeits because you can see, again, this is where this product is made. If I can see it all the way through the supply chain, and I know, and it has that GTIN that shows it's mine, it enables more product authenticity, eliminates those counterfeits, which obviously is a huge problem within our industry. So that leads me to Sunrise 2027. So what do I mean by Sunrise 2027? So I mentioned way at the beginning that everything we do at GS1 US comes from the industry, and Sunrise 2027 is not any different around that. What we heard from the industry, and not just the apparel industry, this is also in grocery and food service, these are industries that we work in, is that there is a need for more data. Just like I was talking about with the EPCIS and needing more traceability data, there's just a need for more data in total within all of the industries. And so the industry came together and said, we need a way to scan more data at POS. And that's what Sunrise 2027 is about. It's about a retailer's ability to scan a 2D barcode and basically do something with it at checkout. And I want to be clear, what I'm going to talk about today is around scanning 2D barcodes at POS, at checkout. It is not about 2D barcodes within distribution. We are looking at that and talking with the industry. That it actually came up as more of a conversation as we started to talk more and more with industries around this initiative. It became clear that it's not just about POS. There are needs within distribution as well. But for today's purposes, we're going to focus on Sunrise 2027, which is really, again, about a retailer's ability to scan a 2D barcode at checkout. And the reason, like I said, is that brands, regulators, retailers, and most of all, really consumers need more data on their products. And, if you look at any product now, whether it's in the grocery store or an apparel retailer, there are lots of QR codes. There's lots and lots of barcodes on products. But wouldn't it be nice if you could just scan one and get all that data that you need? And that's what Sunrise 2027 is about. Scanning that 2D barcode, that QR code, that data matrix, and having a consumer be able to scan it and understand about their product. So let's take a step back and say, okay, what do I mean by a 1D versus a 2D barcode? So a 1D barcode is the plain old UPC, the 1D barcode that carries the global trade item number. If you think about when you scan a 1D barcode, it can only hold one data point. And I would say 9 times out of 10, that's the price, right? You scan it at checkout, it gives you your price, it goes beep, and you leave. And that's fine. And it's been around for 50 years. It has worked for 50 years. And it does what it needs to do. From that point only, it can give you the price. Sometimes size can be an issue too. If your packaging is small, UPCs have to be a certain size so it can be scanned so you can fit the GTIN in it. So it's limited. It's limited in what it can do. And examples of a 1D barcode, to be clear, that's the UPCA and EAN, the data bar that you might see on fruit, an ITF 114, and even a GS1 128 for packaging. A 2D barcode is like what is here on the screen. It is a QR code or a data matrix are two examples. There's also a GS1 data matrix, which is another version of data matrix. It can hold, these types of barcodes can hold a GTIN plus something else in a smaller footprint and actually they're more reliable with the error correction. So there can be more around it and it'll still scan. the key to the 2D barcode is it's GTIN plus something else. It doesn't have to be. It could just be a GTIN if a brand wants to move directly to a 2D barcode, you could. And if you only wanted to have a GTIN in your 2D barcode, you can. But the benefits are that it can hold more. It can hold a serial number. It can hold a batch lot. And we'll get into that in a second. So at the beginning, I talked about identify, capture, and share. And barcodes are just really a way to, again, to capture the data. So it's what you're going to put into the data that's important. So in this slide, I'm demonstrating what it can look like with a GS1 digital link and our GTIN. So that second bucket shows it's a made-up product website it's a box of rice. If you looked at it, it would show that you can see that the product's website, but that 01, that actually indicates that it's a GTIN, and then you can see the GTIN. And so that's the syntax for how GS1 digital link can be used within the 2D barcode. So in this case, it's literally only showing you the GTIN. But you can, if a consumer scanned that barcode, it could take them to information about that product using that website and using that web resolver. But what's great about digital link, you don't have to change the barcode on your packaging to change the messaging, because that's all done, I'll call it behind the scenes, using the web resolver. But you still get that same ability to use the QR code as the barcode for checkout at POS. It really enhances what can be done on packaging without having to change the packaging. So I wanted to show examples of digital link of what I mean by digital link. So digital link, GS1 digital link is a standard that puts the data in a web resolvable format. So this example, so the first example at the top shows you the URL, just a URL, right? That's just a regular, here's your example, this is how it works, slash, unique link. The second bucket is just a QR code that would take you to a consumer engagement piece without digital link, so you don't see the GTIN. So the third bucket is what really shows you how digital link looks in the standard. So you have your example website, you have that 01, which means the GTIN, and then your UPC. And this is what's going to take you to all that enhanced data using the GS1 digital link standard, but also, again, and I know I'll sound like a broken record, but it's all about being able to still scan it at POS and check out and have the customer pay and leave like they normally would. Again, using GS1 digital link, because you don't need to change your packaging, you can do all kinds of things that you can't just do with a regular UPC barcode. These are just some examples. You could have different language settings within the same barcode. You could have different time of day messages within the same QR code. And this is my favorite one. Based on location, you could have different messaging to different customers. So if you have a store in Ohio versus a store in Maine, you could share different messages. You could also have different applications for different people depending on who's scanning the barcode. Because while these QR codes can be scanned at checkout and used for that, which is the #1 purpose, the #2 purpose is to have a consumer scan and get their data. But you can also use just a regular barcode scanner on it and have store associates have marketing messages if they need to mark something down, if they need to merchandise it a certain way in the store. You could get that all using the same barcode based on how you set it up within the web format. So many different experiences, and so much more that it can do than just the barcode by itself, a UPC barcode. So let's talk about some of the use cases that you can get just by moving to the 2D barcode using digital link. And I will say that we had a work group at GS1 US where we focused on, in the apparel industry, what are the best use cases? And the use cases within apparel where I focus can be different than the use cases within retail grocery, which actually is one of the benefits. There are multiple benefits that can be used just by using a QR code with digital link. And some of those inventory management, again, I mentioned around serialization. You can put a serial number into a 2D barcode. You can't put that into a 1D barcode. You can only have the GTIN. So for inventory management, if you want to understand the exact item that was sold, the exact piece, you can use a 2D barcode for that. That also helps with returns management. If you want to, or returns fraud even, if someone tries to return something that they didn't buy at your store, if you use the serialization at checkout, you can say, oh no, I sold this exact sweater at this store. If someone tries to return something they didn't buy from your store, you'll be able to see that. So there's a loss prevention aspect to that as well. Traceability, I talked about, you'll be able to understand where things came throughout the supply chain. Safety, big especially in grocery. Imagine a romaine lettuce recall, being able to scan the 2D barcode to know that which batch lot was the problem. You'd be able to understand, be able to pull that off your shelf quickly instead of having to search through each one for the printed piece on the bag, or for an expiration date too. You can put expiration date into a 2D barcode, and that can help pull things off the shelves that are expired, or even tell a consumer if they're going to buy milk at the store and it's already expired, a message could pop up at checkout and say, nope, you know what, maybe you don't want to buy that milk, go get another one that's not expired yet. Sustainability, which is actually a big passion of mine, is another use case that's enabled by 2D. Being able to understand where products were made, were they made sustainably? Do they have a sustainability certification attached to it, such as was it made of organic cotton? That can be linked into that 2D barcode using digital link. You could attach the certificate number. That is really important, that when brands and retailers are sharing that data, do they know if their product was sourced sustainably? That is data that can be put into a 2D barcode. Consumer engagement, I can't stress that enough on how much is unlocked from the consumer end. And this is different, I would say, from our GS1 US perspective. In the past, I would say we typically worked with, brands and retailers at the, item data people who were setting up their items, making sure their UPCs were attached properly, making sure their EDI worked, those types of things on that type of business to business end. There's a business to consumer piece now that is unlocked by 2D, and we're starting to actually talk with more marketing people, because it's the marketing people who need to be involved. What is a consumer going to see when they scan that 2D barcode? What are you trying to tell them? We've also been working with them to understand what happens when you scan the barcode in a certain store. We were working with a shoe retailer. We were talking with a shoe retailer, and with what they did within their own retail stores was different than actually what was being scanned within their wholesale customer stores. So in their own stores, it gave a huge consumer engagement experience within their store to buy their product within their stores. But when they sent it to their wholesale customer, it just took to a blank product page to tell about the product itself. And that way, the retailer can still have their own messaging around the product with and managing within their own website. Lastly, improved packaging. So QR codes are smaller than UPC barcodes. Now, I will with the caveat, the more data you do put into a 2D barcode, the bigger it does get. However, digital link helps solve that, because you're doing most of it behind the scenes within the web resolver. So imagine smaller packaging, less waste. And as we've been working a lot on understanding the new extended producer responsibility laws that are coming into place in the US, would smaller packaging reduce those fees? And 2D barcode, if it takes up less space, could help that as well. So many use cases, and I'm only touching on what can be done with these barcodes.
Hey, Amy, we do have a quick question
Sure.
from our attendees. So you are mentioning several benefits for retailers and manufacturers in terms of traceability and inventory and that and the like. Are there also benefits that extend over to consumers from the use of 2D barcodes?
Yes, definitely. And I think one of the biggest ones is product authenticity, understanding that I don't think consumers think about too much. I even myself as a consumer is shopping, like when you buy the product, you scan it at checkout and you go home with it. You don't really think about the barcode and what that can do for you. Now having this 2D barcode and being able, and I will say the one good thing that came out of COVID is that people understand what a QR code is and how to scan that. Even my mom can scan a QR code. It took her a second. It took her a second. She did try to take a picture of it, but we got there. But she knows what that is now too. And more people are aware of a QR code, and more people scan them now to get that information. I do. I scan QR codes to understand sustainability data, like to understand was this sourced sustainably. And so there is that consumer engagement piece can help consumers get more data about their product. But I think also ensuring the authenticity of it. There's so, I mentioned earlier, there's so many counterfeits out there. Heard from a shoe retailer once that their counterfeits are $2 billion. $2 billion in counterfeits. And being able for a consumer to feel confident in what they're buying, a 2D barcode can help that, because not only would it take them to a product page to tell them about their product, but also having that GTIN gives them that reliability that their product is what it says it is.
Yep,
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, those are really good points. And maybe we can address one more before we move on.
Yeah.
Will new hardware or software be required at point of sale to successfully scan the QR codes?
That is a great question. So, no. Well, yes and no. So, yes. So most optical scanners can already read a 2D barcode. So if you have an optical scanner, which I think it's like 95% of scanners, POS scanners are optical scanners, yes, it can read a 2D barcode. There is a software update that has to be done, so a firmware update, to read the 2D barcode and do something with it. So I like to say when I talk about Sunrise 2027 that it's a retailer's ability to scan a 2D barcode and do something with it. To do something with it, you need to have that firmware update. And one thing, the other piece of that I'll mention is there's going to be a transition time. Not everyone, Sunrise 2027 that's the starting point. Although, I mean, there are retailers out there and some brands already that have started already. That's not, we're not saying you have to wait till 2027 to start anything. It's now, starting now. But we know on January 1st, 2027, not every retailer in the world is going to be ready to scan a 2D barcode and do something with it. So there's going to be a time where there's a transition time, where there's both a 1D and a 2D barcode on a hang tag or on a product. And we have done extensive testing with the University of Memphis to ensure that with the right software changes, that the scanners only read one, because that would be the worst, right? If you're charging customers twice for the same product, right? No one wants that to happen. So we've done testing, and we have, and there are some resources within this deck that we'll share that have a test kit that you can take that test kit, and it takes, I think, 45 minutes to go through all different kinds of scenarios of barcodes together to see if your systems are ready to go. That's one, and it's something we can help enable as well. So it's a great question. And like I said, it's a yes and no. Yes, your hardware should be ready, and or no, you don't need to change your hardware, but yes, you probably do need to make a software update to read it.
Got it. We just got another question in, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
And it's a great one. With a 1D barcode, if the barcode itself is damaged or unscannable, the human readable number may be used to enter into the point of sale. What happens with the 2D or the QR code if that's damaged? Is there a human readable number that can be punched in?
Yes, that's a great question too. And yes, just like and I don't think the example was there, but just like the 1D has the human readable underneath, the same thing with the QR code. And in our general spec, it shows how that should look, including, and the difference of it, it'll have that 01 in front of it, and you'll type that 01, and then the rest of the GTIN number, just like you would on a UPC. But it's a great question. And even though that QRs have better error correction, we do understand that there needs to be a human readable on there for that same reason.
Gotcha. Thank you.
It's a great question.
And thanks everyone for the questions. Keep putting them in Q&A.
Okay. All right. So like I said, these are some of the use cases in the deck. There is a link to a document that we put together within working with brands and retailers, again, in the apparel space, about what are the best use cases. And so you'll have access to that document that talks about how you can gain those other benefits as well. So I mentioned RFID in the beginning, and there was a reason for that, because RFID and 2D barcodes really work hand in hand, especially in the apparel space. So as I said, going back to 2008, where we were doing RFID in apparel, RFID is already serialized. And that is great. You're already getting that, really rich amount of data. A 2D barcode, like I also mentioned, can hold serialized data. So here's the place where you can use these two things together. And in the apparel space, I would say this was like the #1 use case. Using the serialization you already have from RFID and putting it in that 2D barcode. So for retailers and brands who are already using RFID for inventory management, by like I said before, where you don't have to use line of sight to scan it, you can scan your whole floor and get your inventory management, do your cycle counts, just like you would, normal day-to-day business. But now you can take that same data for that same product and scan it at POS, and that unlocks a whole new level of data. We'd like to say, and we've said it for a while, that a lot of times the RFID data, especially the sales data, really gets thrown on the floor. It's all rolled up to the UPC level, and you're not getting that extra benefit. You have all the serialized data, and how can you use it better? So being able to scan it at POS, understand what you sold at the actual individual item level, unlocks those other use cases, like I mentioned before, especially around returns management, loss prevention, even mismates. We used to have a huge problem with like bathing suit tops and bottoms being like switched out and losing track of what's what, or two different shoes being returned. This helps it because you have the serialized piece of this specific shoe. These go together and can just, there's like real ROI to using that data. I will note there's not a requirement to enable RFID for Sunrise 2027, just especially in the apparel space. It's just a huge benefit to using information that you already have. You're probably not going to see the same thing in grocery. We're not going to see a lot of serialized, bags of lettuce or apples, but there's other data there that you're getting too, that you might not see in apparel, like a batch lot, where you need that for food. There's differences, and that's actually one of the huge wins that we've been seeing with 2D, is that there's multiple wins for multiple industries, and it's not all the same. Here's the example, Linda, to the question around like with the what it looks like with the human readable. So you can see on the left shows the data matrix with the 01 for the GTIN and the 21, which was the serial number. And these are just some examples of what that would look like when they're together. So you're taking that serialized data and you're taking your GTIN and you're putting it together and getting the benefit of both worlds with both a 2D barcode and, like on the right, the RFID tag together. Just a big win. I'm just going to touch really, really briefly on 2D in both machine vision and AI. So obviously, AI is the buzzword of the year. I can't go to a conference where I don't hear someone talking about AI in some respect within the industry. But usually what it comes down to is you can't really use AI or machine vision if you don't have good data. And really the GTIN plus the serial or plus, an expiration date or plus a batch lot gives you that more enriched data within your systems that allow machine visioning or AI to really work together. So thinking about, we haven't even touched the surface yet on how all these things can work together and what we can learn. But what we do know is that the key is understanding your data and having access to that rich data. And I know harping on it, but that serialization and having and knowing your inventory at the individual item level is going to unlock some of that data that's needed for AI to really work. Oh, and here is the test kit. As I mentioned, you can test this out yourself with your own POS systems in your own POS lab or your test POS systems to see if the barcodes will work within your systems. And like I said, and I've had people call us and say, okay, I tested all of them. I had a question about these two. What does this mean? What does this look like? Just to get ready. And we're here to help with that. And like I said, we worked with the University of Memphis to develop this test kit. We tested it all in the lab. And that's great. It's very important to test in the lab. But what we need are for brands and retailers to test this out themselves. Is it working within their hardware, your hardware, to make sure it really does work? So as we get to 2027, everyone's ready to go. Lastly, Linda, are there any more questions around that before I get to the last part?
Not at the moment. You can.
Okay, great. And one thing I can't believe I didn't mention, I'll go back to this for 1 second, is 1D barcodes aren't going away. I just need to be clear about that. That's it's not sunset 2027, it's sunrise 2027 for a reason. We're starting this new initiative, the initiative to be ready to scan at POS in 2027 is what this means. And that's also why I mentioned the transition tag. There's going to be a period of time where retail, you're going to need both. Now, I have heard from some brands, they're ready to go. Hey, let me just put the 2D on, and the retailers aren't quite ready yet. So it's everyone has to work together. This is an industry initiative where everyone has to work together to make this happen. So we've been working with brands and retailers that want to pilot, that want to test it, that want to get ready. And that's what you all need to do. And as GS1 US, we're here to help with that. And this test kit is one way. The last thing I want to mention is about our apparel and general merchandise initiative. So this is what I do. I lead our apparel and general merchandise initiative, or AGM as we call it here at GS1 US. What we do is, we bring brands and retailers together to talk about things just like this. We had, like I mentioned, we had a work group which brought brands and retailers together to say, what are the best use cases for using these 2D barcodes? We know that we need to do it, but how can we tell the industry what they need to hear? And it's not coming from GS1 US. I facilitate, I help write the document, but the ideas of what the best use cases were from brands and retailers throughout the United States. That's one of the benefits of joining our initiative. We also have discounts on some training. So if you wanted to learn about, more of our standards and how they work, we have certificate courses. We also have a discount on our conference. Our conference is held yearly in June. This year it's in Nashville. And And so there are benefits, so there are discounts to come to the conference by joining the initiative. So there's a link and I can always answer more questions about that. Here, as I mentioned, are some of the resources that are available. I had the test kit on the earlier slide. The document that I just mentioned, the work group, was called Unlocking the Benefits of 2D Barcodes in Apparel and General Merchandise. And you're going to hear, you'll see in a really easy to read document, what are those use cases and things to think about. There's also links to the general specification, but also like how to code some of the most common used application identifiers, like that 01 for GTIN, or 21 for serial number. There's information around that, and also what those transition tags can look like. I also included in here the EPC tag placement guideline, which was new last June, which RFID, like I said, has been around for years in apparel, but we're also starting to see that there's other parts of the store that need RFID tags. And so things like golf clubs or a baseball bat, where do I need to put an RFID tag on those types of products to make sure that they can be read? So we updated our guideline with how to do that. There's a Getting Ready for Sunrise 2027 document that talks a lot about what I just talked about today, but in a great, easy to read format. And then lastly, I attached a video around EPCIS. So I just really touched the surface on what EPCIS is and what it can do. And this is a 6-minute video that kind of just walks you through what is EPCIS, what to think about, and how you might want to use it within your own business. And that's all I have. So thank you so much. I am here to answer anyone's questions or work with your trading partners to help you get ready or help the industry get ready for Sunrise 2027. I'm super passionate about it. I love talking about it because I really do feel this is what the industry needs to get ready for the future. So Linda, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, Amy, this was a lot of great information. Thank you for all that. We do have time for some questions, so we encourage you again to put any questions in the Q&A. We do have one in there right now. Is GS1 looking at a time frame or deadline for businesses to have 2D barcodes in place?
So as much as I would love to say we require things as a neutral and not-for-profit organization, I can't require anything. And GS1 standards are always, it was in that first slide on antitrust, that GS1 standards are voluntary, not mandatory. So we can't say it has to be done by a certain date. That being said, the goal around Sunrise 2027 is to have the retailers ready to be able to at least scan a 2D barcode in 2027. But there's no hard deadline, but the idea is that the retailers are ready to go.
Right. And the 1D barcodes are not completely going away, never to be seen again.
No. I'll say that as much as I say some of the other, a 1D barcode is not going away. It's not sunset 2027, it's sunrise. It's the ability to do more, but the 1D is not going away.
Awesome. I know we have several service providers on the call. What would be your advice on what they can do to support their retailer and supplier clients in this initiative?
Yeah, such a great question. And we do have a solution provider program, and that I work super closely with, that work with a lot of our service providers to do the same thing, to talk through how 2D barcodes can help and how they can work with their brands and retailers. We can do education just like we did today for their partners or for them, or if we wanted to schedule a one-on-one call to talk in more detail, we are here for that.
Great. Here's another one. Is 2D barcode technology already being used in other parts of the world?
Yes, what we're seeing is, especially in Asia, I would say it's more advanced in Asia, but we've also seen it in Latin America. And you know what? Even in the US, it is being used in the US, just not to the level that would be considered ubiquitous that everyone is doing it. But there are brands out there, Puma is an example of a brand who is using it within their own stores, and in fact turned off the 1D barcode in their own stores. They scan a 2D barcode in their stores that has the serialization in it, and they've talked about that at, in public, so I'm not sharing anything secret there. And there are other retailers that are close and getting ready to do it too in the US. So while they are further ahead in Asia, they're not the only ones. And from Sunrise 2027 is a GS1 US initiative, but at the global level, they call it Ambition 2027. It's the same concept. And as I mentioned in the beginning, GS1 standards, the whole point is interoperability. So you'll be able to scan that a US 2D barcode in Europe or Asia or Latin America.
Great. All right. One more I see here. So GS1 US makes it easy for businesses right now to obtain UPC code numbers for new products. Will GS1 US also be making standardized 2D barcode numbers available in a similar way?
So what's great about a GTIN is a GTIN. It doesn't matter what kind of barcode you put in it. So if you go back and you think about that really crazy busy slide where it had identify, capture, and share, the GTIN number is what recognizes the product, and the barcode is just how you capture it. So it doesn't change in how you license a barcode number from us. The same way you go in and you click buy a barcode on or get my barcodes on gs1us.org, that doesn't change. It's just the type of barcode that you put that data into, and barcode creators are available just like they are now.
Well, great. Well, look, that brings us to the end of today's session. A huge thank you to you, Amy, for sharing your valuable insights and expertise with us. It's always a pleasure. To our audience, thank you for your active participation and engagement. We hope you found this webinar informative and beneficial. Remember, we'd love to hear from you. Any specific supply chain topics you'd like us to cover in upcoming webinars in the ECGrid Presents series, please let us know. Visit our website and give us a shout. Please be sure to follow Lauren Data ECGrid on LinkedIn for any updates on future webinars and other valuable content. So we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great day, everyone.